I am incredibly excited for today's important forum with our guests, who I'll introduce in just a couple of minutes. Today's Phillips forum is titled Zero Youth Corrections, Insights into the Work of Reimagining Youth Justice. We're proud to be joined by our Round 2 ZYC grantees today from Pathfinders and Paradigm Shyft, who I will introduce in a moment, as well as representatives from Milwaukee County Department of Health and Human Services and Children, Youth, and Family Services. We're very excited to be able to bring everyone together again here at Turner Hall and online on Zoom and Facebook Live. Today's nonpartisan hybrid forum is being sponsored in part by MICA, the Public Welfare Foundation, the Wisconsin Civic Power Table, Wisconsin Voices, and the Hertzfeld Foundation. If you're interested in sponsoring the Phillips Forum, please visit the Phillips Forum page on our website. So now I'm going to get into a couple more logistics for our audience in person and for our virtual viewers. In addition to the forum being held here at historic Turner Hall, which is a national, city, and county historic landmark, this forum is also being broadcast on Zoom and on the Milwaukee Turners Facebook page. We invite you to share the live feed to your own Facebook pages using the link provided in the chat so that others can share and learn from this important conversation. It is being recorded and the edited version will be shared, but you can also immediately see and share the Facebook Live version of the broadcast on our page once it's done. So again, we encourage you to share it while it's happening so that other people can see it. For our friends on Zoom, captioning is available. Click on the live transcript CC icon to use captioning or to turn it off, and then click Show Subtitle. Click View Full Transcript to see the full captioning stream. We also have ASL interpreters available on Zoom today from DJC Interpreting. We're very grateful to them for providing this service. Please contact the chat moderators if you need assistance. After the panel, hopefully, there will be an opportunity for the public to ask questions. We'll go based on time and vibes. But for viewers on Facebook Live and Zoom, you can ask questions in the comments or chat, and we can share those with our panelists either during the panel or after the fact. If you'd like to ask a question here at Turner Hall, you can grab an index card right by my smartly dressed colleague, Brother Mustafa, who is standing at the back. He's right by the index cards. And please write your question out. They'll bring it up to me. We probably won't get through all of them, but we can share them with the panelists. So let's dig in. This, again, is our Zero Youth Corrections Round 2 forum. Zero Youth Corrections, Insights into the Work of Reimagining Youth Justice. Milwaukee County's Zero Youth Corrections is a partnership between the county's Department of Health and Human Services, or DHHS, Children, Youth, and Family Services, CYFS, the Milwaukee Turners, and the Public Welfare Foundation, who are collectively committed to reducing reliance on youth punishment and detention and investing in community-driven supports and services for youth and families. In the long term, we want to see zero youth corrections in Milwaukee County. ZYC is a unique system community partnership built to create transformative change in the way Milwaukee County approaches youth justice. And speaking of Milwaukee County, I'm hoping to pull up Deputy Director of DHHS, David Muhammad, to say a few words about the program.
Good evening. Again, my name is David Muhammad. Thank you, Krissie. Thank you to everybody at the Turners. ZYC is a partnership that we've been involved with going on now. This is our 4th year. And this is a significant and I believe innovative partnership that we learn just as much from, if not maybe a little bit more sometimes, than maybe the partners do in terms of how to partner effectively with grassroots organizations, smaller organizations, and justice-impacted persons. ZYC was the brainchild of the work, and they want me to sit and talk into this microphone. ZYC was the brainchild of work that was happening at Department of Health and Human Services. At the time, it was Mark Mertens. Now Kelly Pethke is the administrator, and Danique Seymour, who's also been the project manager for us. We wanted to reinvest and do participatory budgeting and re-granting to grassroots providers who could advocate and do innovative solutions to decrease the number of young people going into the carceral system, and not just through reform efforts, but zero is the goal, and that's the name. The amount that we initially started with was a $200,000 match from the Public Welfare Foundation, and we put up $200,000 of youth aids dollars. For those who are unfamiliar, youth aids is the amount of support that we get from the state of Wisconsin for the number of young people sent into corrections. At the time, $400,000 or just about was the cost for one young person to be incarcerated for a year in Lincoln Hills. A lot of movement that took place to close Lincoln Hills, to bring young people home, closer to home, and we believe that systems build buildings but don't build people. We wanted to do something different and do an iterative process that involved the public. This has been the work. And since then, we've had some ups and downs. It'll come up in tonight's forum. We've learned a lot. Sometimes, as they say, all money ain't good money. And sometimes government money comes with a lot of red tape and strings, but some of us have the ability to push through and cut through a lot of that. And so I look forward to hearing from Dr. Sturck and from others involved, but know that this has been the commitment of Milwaukee County to bring young people home and build community and build people rather than continuing to build that footprint that locks young people up. The numbers went up in terms of cost. This is the last thing I'll say. I know it's just 2-3 minutes. The number went up in terms of cost. It doubled from $400,000. It was going to go up to about $800,000 to lock up one young person a year. We, through the role of advocates and others working behind the scenes, were able to put that kind of an increase off the table in the governor's budget, gratefully. And it bought us some time, but it bought us time to build up momentum to make sure that we never have to go back to a time where people are making profit off of locking up young people in such a disgusting way as they have been historically. So thank you for being here tonight, and thank you to the Turners for partnering with us and hosting.
Thank you so much, David. So I promise we will get to the good stuff soon, but I'm just gonna give you a little more context about the program, the history of ZYC, because we have done a lot in these last 4 years, and just give you some context and some landscape before we get into these amazing programs. So as part of the process in setting all of this up, we established a ZYC advisory board made up of community representatives working in youth justice with young people or with lived expertise. We hosted a lot of community forums to determine funding priorities and the RFP process. And we also made visits to Phillips Youth Detention Center and adjusted our work between funding rounds with inputs from applicants, grantees, and a process evaluation conducted with partners at Catalyze Justice. Over 3 rounds of funding, our collaborative invested $1.2 million in organizations working to reimagine youth justice. As the program blossomed, we shifted our focus to move towards what we saw as a gap in funding priorities and an opportunity to push funders and systems towards upstream investment and systems change thinking. In round 3, thanks to additional investment from the Public Welfare Foundation, we are building a youth justice community table that will collectively advocate for decarcerative youth justice in Milwaukee. Led by a community table convener that will be hosted at the Milwaukee Turners, the table will be made up of community partners from various sectors impacting young people, and including direct service providers, advocates, and organizers. We are going to work to build collaborative, narrative, strategic, political, and public education tactics focused on reducing the reliance on carceral solutions in Milwaukee, impacting young people and their families. We anticipate that we'll get started in the fall with this, so stay tuned, and we will be sending out more information to the organizations that have expressed interest, many of whom I think are in this room, later this week. But if you're interested in getting on that list, please send us an email at zyc@milwaukeeturners.org. So now let's set the stage. I'll be honest, Milwaukee and Wisconsin have a youth justice problem. According to the criminal legal system landscape compiled by our friend Professor Ted Lentz, between July 2022 and June 2023, nearly 80% of referrals in Milwaukee County were for Black youth. Wisconsin is one of only 3 states that automatically charge 17-year-olds as adults, and children even younger may be waived into adult court for violating any criminal law. The vast majority of police referrals and school-based arrests, again, are Black and multiracial children, and Wisconsin's Type 1 youth facilities were ordered to be closed in light of inhumane conditions, including unconstitutional use of solitary confinement, yet they continue to operate. Milwaukee is now building a new facility closer to home, but this doesn't necessarily solve the underlying issues behind youth incarceration. As Milwaukee County CYFS moves towards its goal of eliminating the placement of youth in state-run juvenile corrections institutions and will operate its own secure residential care center for youth with expanded beds, there is a need to ensure that a healthier ecosystem is nurtured. An ecosystem of community input, violence intervention, diversion, and alternatives that addresses the root causes of youth behavior at the environment level. So we will soon hear from each of our panelists, who I'm going to briefly introduce, and then they can also talk about themselves. But here representing our Round 2 grantee Pathfinders is Tricia Redmond, Director of Runaway and Homeless Youth Services, and Z, our Youth Action Board President. Pathfinders provide safety, hope, and healing for unhoused youth aged 11 to 25 in Milwaukee, with a focus on meeting youth's immediate needs and supporting their long-term stability. Pathfinders offers housing, shelter, street outreach, mental wellness, employment and education support, life skills, support, and basics like food, clothing, and showers. The youth leaders of the Zero Youth Corrections Committee, part of Pathfinders' Power of Paths Youth Action Board, inform Pathfinders programming, and challenge and change the systems that contribute to youth homelessness, criminalization, trauma, and crisis. Representing Paradigm Shyft is Adam Procell, CEO, and Shannon Ross, Operations Assistant of Paradigm Shyft. Paradigm Shyft is a Milwaukee-based multidimensional justice solutions firm founded to bring new insights and ideas to justice and reentry systems through community-rooted innovation, policy influence, and direct service. They leverage over 40 years of combined experience across international criminal justice, education, community healing, housing, and workforce development efforts to design and deliver transformative projects. So at the start, we wanted to give both of our Round 2 grantees an opportunity to present on their successful and innovative programs, and then we'll get into some questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our Pathfinders team to present on their program. We can clap for them, y'all. Let's clap for them.
Hi, everyone. Let me just start off by saying that this is a huge honor to even be in this space with all of you, to get to talk on this topic and get to brag about all the really awesome things that our youth leaders do at Pathfinders. So we're just really excited. We are from Pathfinders, as Krissie said, and are here to talk about our ZYC project, which is our Power of Paths Youth Action Board. So like Krissie said, let me not trip. My name is Tricia. I am the Director of Runaway and Homeless Youth Services at Pathfinders. So I oversee and support all of our runaway and homeless youth services. So our emergency youth shelter, our drop-in center services, street outreach, and our anti-violence advocacy services for young people who've experienced trafficking or sexual exploitation. I have been at Pathfinders for a little bit over 9 years. I started as an anti-violence advocate and have been working in youth services for over 15 years.
Hi everyone, my name is Zatyra, or I prefer Z. I am the president over the Youth Action Board there at Pathfinders. I've been with Pathfinders since I was 13 years old, and they have literally been there to support me every step of the way. And yeah.
So I know we only have 10 minutes and there's so much we want to share, so I'll go quick with just giving a quick overview of Pathfinder services, which I could talk about for over 10 minutes alone. So Pathfinders has been serving runaway and homeless young people ages 25 and under for over 55 years. We started in 1970 with our emergency youth shelter, which is a beautiful home on East Kane on the east side. And we have our emergency youth shelter, which is for young people ages 11 through 17 who can stay for up to 2 weeks or do confidential short-term stays, walk-in stays. We also have our drop-in center, which this is a beautiful picture of, which is located at our 42 North Holton location, where young people ages 25 and under who are homeless or experiencing housing instability can come get their basic needs met, take a shower, get something to eat, do laundry, access case management, do a housing screening to get connected with resources. We also have homeless prevention services for young people who are at risk of losing their housing, which includes both flexible funds assistance and ongoing case management. We have anti-violence advocacy for young people who are 25 and under who have experienced trafficking or sexual violence. We also have counseling services across all of our programs, and a number of supported housing programs for young people and clinical services through a contract with BHD. We have comprehensive community services and CORE. Everything we do at Pathfinders is rooted in positive youth development and treating our young people as assets, and they truly drive our programming, our hiring, everything in between, training for our staff, and everything we do is rooted in collaboration with those who have lived expertise. So this is our Power of PADS Youth Action Board. Shout out to the Power of PADS Youth Action Board leaders who are here tonight. Thank you all. They are arguably the coolest part about Pathfinders, and there's many cool parts about Pathfinders, so that's saying a lot. Pathfinders, since it started, has a history of youth leadership, both in like training our staff, training partners, medical providers, law enforcement, other service providers. They participate in all of our interviews to hire our staff. We really value compensation, or making sure they're compensated for their feedback, their input, their time, and are also involved in different paid positions that we have at Pathfinders. Our Youth Action Board, through a collaborative CRAE, which is focused on supporting young people who experience sexual exploitation, started in 2018, which was our first formal Youth Action Board at Pathfinders. Then it was called Youth Advisory Board, and then our Power of PADS Youth Action Board was formally formed in 2022. But we've had a lot of youth leadership board types before then. There's a lot we could say about the AB structure, but I'll be really quick. There's regularly scheduled meetings. There's a board cabinet. Again, many of those members are here tonight, including Z. We have coordinators for each committee, including ZYC. There's extensive policies and procedures and trainings. There's 4 committees to the Youth Action Board that focus on the different priorities that intersect with youth homelessness and housing instability. So there's the Youth Homeless Demonstration Project, which is focused on ending youth homelessness. CRAE, Collaborative Rapid Advocacy for Youth, is focused on supporting and advocating for youth who've experienced exploitation. Prevention Demonstration Project, which is focused on preventing youth homelessness. And then ZYC, which is focused on youth justice. Oh, there we go. So during round 2, we focused on a youth leadership model. For our ZYC project, our youth leaders all had lived expertise and with being impacted by the justice system, and they focused on advocating for systems change to meet the needs of young people in Milwaukee, focusing on the intersection and decriminalization of homelessness. So many of our young people have shared report like being criminalized due to survival and needing to get their basic needs met. So with our model, we compensate our youth leaders $600 a month to amplify their voices, through a number of different ways. And there's 10 young youth leaders and 1 coordinator who meet on a weekly basis to identify different strategies. Well, they started meeting on a weekly basis. That's shifted, but to prevent young people from being impacted by the justice system. And there's an hour structure and requirement around that where they are also supporting other young people and being involved in different related community efforts.
So just speaking on the impact of ZYC, 11 youth leaders were part of ZYC YAB committee when it started. 8 have stayed consistent throughout the 18-month grant. 15 total served as youth leaders. Many youth identified the youth leadership experience as preventing them from having additional involvement with the justice system. Now since, well, this came from one of our youth. Now since I'm a ZYC member, now that's a higher standard to me. Now I can't be getting into any trouble. I have to be an example. There's an accountability in that. And then going back to what you said as far as like members having like hour requirements and stuff, a lot of times that can look like just, you know, supporting in the drop and kind of just like, you know, taking one of the young people under your wings and just being that guidance for them, kind of like, you know, we went through it and we don't want you to go through it kind of thing. So that was like our goal when we created that as well. Where did the youth spend their ZYZ funds? So bills and household costs, rent, utilities, cell phone and internet bills, cleaning supplies, hygiene items. A really good one that I would like to add to that. Some people that's in ZYC, they may still be on probation or parole, and they have fees to get covered. And they also use the funds going towards that as well to make sure that they don't get in any more trouble for missing fees or anything of that sort. Food and daily living, groceries, especially those without food share, baby products and babysitters. You guys, when we first started ZYC, I believe we were just about all pregnant. So, so that definitely is like a big help when it came to the baby situation. Clothing and self-care, everyday clothing, hair products and salon, barbershop services. So they're really big about self-care, making sure that we are big about self-care and loving on ourselves. So like they support that 100% as well. Successes, leadership opportunities, coordinating weekly meetings, providing peer support, advocating within programs, mentorship, and skill building workshops. We are in the process now of presenting workshops with our inside young people, but we are soon to be reaching out to like schools through MPS, other like places like Owen's Place, other partnerships that we could build to spread the word. Planned and implemented a governance structure, policies, procedures, and accountability process. Develop peer education workshop about law enforcement interactions and rights to prevent involvement with the justice system. Building community partnerships, connections with LIT, and increasing civic engagement. I'm not for sure if you guys are familiar with LIT, but LIT is Leaders Igniting Transformation. They do a lot around like civics and knowing your rights and just about law enforcement alone and knowing your rights and stuff. Lessons learned, engagement, making sure people are ready for the commitment, flexibility, member structure, hours requirement, schedule opportunities for feedback on YAB, clearly defined policies, membership breaks, etc. Change meetings from weekly to bi-weekly, transportation, food, balance of staff support.
And we're out of time. We have so much that we want to say about this. I'll just say super quickly just to wrap it up. So we are like very honored to have received round 3 funding of ZYC, and our YAB is really excited to be able to continue this really exciting work. And we're going to continue this, like the committee structure, facilitating the workshops that Z described, being really like purposefully and intentionally involved in the community table. and then some other staff training opportunities for those who are serving young people impacted by the justice system. That's it. Sorry for taking so long.
Thank you again, Tricia and Z, for that beautiful presentation of your program. I know everyone is dying to ask questions, and so am I, but first we are going to turn it over to Paradigm Shyft to present on their program, and then we can get into some questions.
All right. As Tricia said, thank you for showing up, and for those that tuned in to hear about the project and the work that we've done, and ask questions and hope that we can answer as we go through. So as Krissie introduced, I'm Shannon, this is Adam, and our project was leveraging a retreat and triangulated mentorship model for systemic change through restorative justice alternatives to incarceration. Now, the premise of the whole program, interestingly enough, me and Adam actually do most of our work in the adult space. Collectively, we spent 40 years in prison, and we were just talking one night about how are people gonna be listening to reentry and the work that we do and care about that when the violence in the city is still so strong, and a lot of it is being, claimed as the result of youth. So we just thought about what would have worked for both of us. I went into prison at 19, Adam went in at 15, and we kind of backhand of a napkin came up with an idea that was really just what would have worked for us. And we just built that out. And this opportunity was open at kind of the same time, and we applied, and it was a good fit for the program. But the whole gist of it was, at a certain point, we don't really know if anything would have changed either of us. At a certain point, as you get older, and it's a hard response that I think we have for folks when they ask us, my son is struggling, my nephew is struggling, he's inside, I'm worried about him going inside. And I have to say, commonly, it doesn't really matter at a certain point. Depending on the age and where the person is, there might not be nothing you can say. But the thing that could work is separation. And prison, at best, when it does work, is separation. How can we create a healthier version of what prison does right, which is separate youth to have an opportunity to see things differently? And so that was the whole goal that we wanted to have. And then go from that, reset, to have a model of mentorship afterwards. So in that, we had specific demographic of youth we were looking for. We specifically went for the most difficult demographic we could. The most difficult demographic are not going to get let out to come join the program, so we had to kind of adjust a bit down. So we wanted youth that had the most need, the highest needs situation, right? And so it was youth that not only have the highest needs, but more so have a leadership capacity that can be used for good, can be used for bad. So how do we shift a lot of the folks that have that leadership capacity and they are taking other people down a path that's not really productive or helpful, but they can also be doing the opposite of that, right? And so many of us that were inside at one point were doing bad, we were leading in a bad way, and a lot of us come home and we're leading in a good way now. So how do we make that happen quicker? Is kind of what the focus of this demographic was. We also wanted youth that, in that vein, are coming home right into our care. We didn't want youth that were already out. It's an interesting phenomena. I should probably create some title for it and give it a scientific label, but every second, every minute that you are free from incarceration, entitlement and chaos kick in more and more. And you don't listen to people. It's the weirdest thing. When you're inside, you'll listen. We'll talk to people that are incarcerated, youth, adults, rapt attention. That eyes on you the whole time. They really want to absorb everything you're saying. Adam used to, run a reentry program, and we would talk about this, how the men who had been out just a short while, a couple weeks, they just wouldn't listen as much, right? They just were on their phone. They were worrying about the sea of freedom items in their life at the time, distractions. And so we needed to have youth that we could connect with before they came home, and then they would come into our care upon the retreat directly to start on release, right? And so that was kind of what we were able to do this time. And we had one youth from Phillips in the end, and we had 2 from that lake. We were trying to go for more, but it's not always easy to just guaranteed get the youth that you had at one point. Things happen over the months, and so we ended up with 3 that started. And that kind of speaks to the window of opportunity aspect too, is what I was mentioning.
So there's a universal truth out there for most of the smart and successful people that I've ever run across, and that's they've all had mentors. And I think that just goes to show that none of us can do this on our own. We're all trying to figure life out. So if we understand that that's a universal truth with most of the successful people that we've encountered, we wanted to sort of amplify that. So we went to this triangulated mentorship approach. And so we wanted to show them their past, their present, and their future by 3 demographics. So all of our youth received 3 mentors. One was somebody who unfortunately took somebody's life and spent decades in prison. As you can see, that's the formerly incarcerated. A mother, or I think, and one father who had lost somebody to gun violence to show the ultimate harm that they can cause. And then, somewhat controversial, a police officer, because that's the present. And that, as we said, we want to emphasize the responsibility and the reality of criminal justice involvement. And so we wanted to, in the next ideation, add a 4th, so quadrated mentorship, because a judge has a lot of power over what happens to a youth. And some of the work that's going on at Phillips, a judge is sort of leaning into a youth from not an adversarial standpoint, but more of what do you need? And so that's what we were starting to look into the future, but as of right now, triangular mentorship.
Thank you. So the retreat wasn't just, again, to hang out, kick it, be free. It was that, but also how do we do that in a way in which there's a lot of constructive and pro-social activities within that. And we are connected to an entity called CC We Adapt, and we've learned a lot about adventure therapy over the past couple of years. And basically what adventure therapy is getting youth out into outdoor activities as a form of therapy. Rock climbing, kayaking, a lot of activity with working out, just a number of things in that regard, right? Hiking, whatever you can think of. And we wanted to put that into this as well as some speakers that we knew to come who have been very connected to and influential in our lives or other youth's lives in the city, and also a way for them to build out what their future plan looks like, right? So we would spend time every night and they would work in their notebooks with the mentors to think about what can my future be, how do I start planning for that, right? So we had a series of things that we would do. So it was a 4-day retreat. It was in the Mississippi River, so this is quite a large space that we got for about 16 of us maybe. And we did all of those things. We went rock climbing. There'll be some pictures on the next slide for some of that. But we did a variety of things just to keep them engaged, right? And just to very much have a different way of exposing them to what's possible and maybe things they never even thought they could do or would enjoy. And again, rooted in all of this is restorative principles, right? We're trying to have very significant level of talking about harm. The mentors are all there representing different sides of the criminal collision that happens. To understand that better, rebuilding trust. It's very big for especially youth, anyone of course, but especially youth, to be able to trust the mentors they're having. So if these people are going to be with them going forward for several months, it's really good to have some, experiences together in an intimate way so that we can, going forward, be able to they can rely on the adults that are with them. And then restoring identity as well is a really big part of it. Youth, so many of us, I think, that grow up in the city, grow up in marginalized areas, in poverty, we kind of lose that, and we never really had it to begin with a lot of times. So just helping understand what that can be, and again, the exploration of what that means. Identity isn't following what other people around you or other people before you that look like you have done. It's whatever you want it to be, right? So how do we shift from what you think has to be the way you move forward to choose whatever makes sense for you of the realm of, in the world of options here. So these are some of the pictures we had. We actually go rock climbing, genuine rocks, large, high, tall rocks, and it is wild, and everyone at the same time will either say something along the lines of, hell no, or hell yeah. And so it just, at the end of it, we've had this 2 years now, and the youth, every time, well, some version of scared and not gonna do it, they all go, they all make it to the top, they all do it again. And the three, they didn't know each other. Well, two of them kind of knew each other, but this, so a little bit of the camaraderie that they acquired during the retreat. When fishing, the place that we went, they had an ATV, and I just asked the guy if he could take them out on a ride, and he took them through all the back areas along the river, just on a very, very fast ATV. I'd never been on one before, so I was worried that something was gonna happen. But yeah, just a lot of things. Again, Kwabena Antoine Nixon came. Flip from Flip's Barbershop came to speak. Ed Hennings came to speak. They'd spend a lot of time in the pool together playing basketball. And then we went out to a nice dinner the very last night. So it's a lot of different activities we did, again, to try and build up the identity, the trust, and just exploration of what's possible in their lives.
She says time, so I'm just going to
You can keep talking
speed
a
through
little bit.
this. So actually, I think you'll find fewer critics tougher than Shannon and I with the system, but with ourselves too. And so what we wanted to focus is on SJO. It's like this boogeyman in the closet. And for those of you who don't know what SJO is, serious juvenile offender, where they can keep juveniles incarcerated up until the age of 25, which sounds terrible. And we thought, absolutely not. We don't want any parts of this. But what we learned is, if you take that away, the only recourse for juveniles who commit the worst of crimes is to send them to the adult prison system. I'm a juvenile lifer. I was the youngest and smallest inmate in the entire adult prison system. This could have saved me from a quarter of a century in prison. So what we found is SJO, boogeyman, the alternative is even worse. And so we had to come to the realization that we have to pivot, and we don't want to waste resources. So we said, you know what? This isn't the best use of ZYC funds, our time, and so we pivoted and kind of focused on restorative justice.
So we are at time, and there's more, of course, there's much more. As Tricia mentioned, there's a whole lot more we could say, but I think that kind of covers it well, what we're doing. The pivot is to create, we are right now building out a marketing and promotional campaign with videos and targeted trainings and presentations around restorative justice for decision makers and system actors, so they can better understand what restorative justice is. Because the view of restorative justice is that it's, all hug each other, let each other go, take our socks off. It's not that. It's actually really difficult, right? It's really difficult work, and we want to be able to demonstrate that restorative justice is accountability. It is solving these problems, and so that's the goal of what we're doing in the next stage with restorative justice.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Both of these presentations are available for our viewers online via a Google Drive link, and will also be available after the event if you'd like to take a look or get in contact with any of our grantees. But now I'm going to shift into asking some questions, first some easy ones and then some harder ones. But I think it's really important because ZYC is such a unique system community partnership. I think that there are a rich amount of lessons for the grantees, for the community, for funders, for Milwaukee County, certainly for myself and for the Milwaukee Turners being involved in this, that we'd like to share with all of you. We're very proud that this year we have begun to have the opportunity to start showcasing this work on a national scale, but zooming in on Milwaukee, what makes ZYC successful from your perspective, and what are some lessons learned that you took with you from your first round of funding to your second round? And I'll open this up to any of the grantees. Both of their organizations did receive 2 rounds of funding amongst the total ZYC rounds. Jump in.
I can start us off. So I think that the youth leadership engagement has just been incredibly powerful, and to hear directly from our youth leaders how involvement in this type of effort that's really amplifying their voice to prevent other young people from being impacted by the justice system, also the impact that has on their own lives, and the level of accountability that they are holding themselves to, because they are also leaders for other young people, is just incredibly meaningful. And to hear, just to watch all the ripple effects, whether it's mentorship of other young people, the concrete plans and action that they're taking, the system's advocacy goals that they're wanting to achieve or have achieved, and then the way you all saw up on the slide that Z was explaining about the way that young people are spending their money, which is preventing themselves from being impacted by the justice system, is just really powerful, because they're spending it on like their own needs, their own survival needs, and just like things that make them feel whole and human, which everybody deserves. So the power in that is huge. And so it's not exactly a direct cash transfer model, but the idea of being able to give flexible funds to young people and being able to compensate them for sharing their voice and their expertise is incredibly powerful. And we've been able to see that growth in the structure of the board, the leadership within the individual leaders over the last year and a half. So that makes it feel really successful.
Thank you. And I do want to highlight, I think that when Pathfinders was presenting, we have sort of like monthly and quarterly check-ins, and when they were presenting to us and showed us the way that young people were spending those dollars, I think that really struck all of us because they are just using it on basic essentials. And I thought that coming out in the surveys was incredibly powerful for your program.
I was going to comment on that as well. Wisconsin spends, I think, $67 billion on R&D, companies do. Across the nation, that's like $600 billion. Just think about how much money is spent on R&D in the corporate setting. ZYC is meant to be R&D in the nonprofit setting, right? And I would argue that this work is, unbiased, more important than most any business that's engaging, right? So when you look at the contrast and you start to maybe have questions, I don't know if you all have had these, like, what are the outcomes? Where is it going? Is it being invested successfully? All these questions that come about, yeah, let's compare that with the realm of money spent on things for the exact same framework to create a new toothpick, right? Or a better teddy bear. This is a whole realm that is way more important, and this is a smidgen of money that we spend on researching so many other things. I think the conversation shouldn't even be a matter of being looked at the same way because of that. This is a given that the type of thing that ZYC is doing, which is incredibly rare, is to say, let's find out what works, because what we're doing clearly does not work. And we're not gonna have a clear path for a little bit sometimes, right? Sometimes you need to figure it out and you learn and you get to a better place that we know we can eventually.
I think that's an incredibly powerful point. And I will say when we started the program, Milwaukee County even referred to it as an experiment. And I think that the Milwaukee Turners are an abolitionist organization. And so to quote one of my favorite abolitionists, Mariam Kaba, she speaks about a million little experiments. And while not everyone in this room is probably explicitly an abolitionist, I think we can all agree that there need to be some transformative shifts in the way we approach youth justice, and framing and seeing this as an experiment that is allowed to have some failures and some changes, I think is really important. So I will ask you this now, what important lessons do you think that funders and that Milwaukee County or the Milwaukee Turners need to know to better support organizations doing the work? Like, what went wrong? What did we do wrong? You can tell us now in front of everybody. Don't be shy.
So I would say, so one of the biggest things that I see that's causing youth to be in the justice system is that youth don't know their rights, or they are being deprived of those rights, but they are not knowing that. So they can be thinking they're just taking on an easy sentence or something, but the whole time, from the beginning, things were just being done injustice. So with knowing that, or how they're being treated in the justice system, or for instance, if a young person is homeless, then they house them in DT because they say that's technically housing, or they're technically not homeless if they're in DT. So that's criminalizing youth in itself. So I know we've been working hard to change things with it's a 12-hour thing where young people can go and stay at the shelter without the parent consent for 12 hours. So we've been working to get that changed to 72 hours, just to kind of give more time to work in finding solutions for the young person so they won't have to go to the detention center. Because that's not fair, like you have to go to the detention center just because you're homeless. So I think that's like one of my biggest ones that we advocate for the most, and that we're like working with and training like law enforcement officers of dealing with young people, or how we're doing like the workshops for young people to know their rights and things of that nature.
Z, I think you point out something that's really critical, which is there are a lot of small rules in systems and bureaucracy and red tape that maybe made sense at the point where they were built, or they may make sense or have justifications for the people working within the systems, but then they're not necessarily seeing the way that those small rules all add up to an intractable situation that is causing harms for our young people. And I'm sure Shannon and Adam also have some things to say about rules, but one of the initial goals of the ZYC program was, in involving the Milwaukee Turners, we were looking to take away and strip away some of the bureaucracy and the red tape that often comes with a larger system, like working with Milwaukee County. And so while that's something that I think we've tried to do within this program, I think as we saw the shift from youth aid dollars to using ARPA dollars, we even saw some consequences with increased bureaucracy and reporting and red tape that we went through.
I would just add to that some things that were lessons learned for us in with our Youth Action Board work was just the flexibility that's required for all of us to just like be very open to continually seeking and updating and constantly like changing the structure based on what our youth leaders is saying works best or isn't working for them, and just how that's a never-ending process, and the reality of that. Also, never to take engagement for granted, and just the very normal cycles that come with like the engagement and the commitment, and then like figuring out how to keep that motivation going, and having a few really dedicated members really being committed to that. Also, being able to provide flexible funds to young people directly is like the most beautiful thing. And also we had a lot of lessons learned around coming up with really good policies and process to not make things feel more complicated for our young people or for whoever was handing out the funds to them. And just when compensation is added on, all the beauty and all the extra layers of making sure that that's done in a really supported way. We grew a lot.
Absolutely, thank you.
And I know, so like, our thing was more so of like having a consistent like meeting day, meeting time. So with ours, we have a mix of young adults that's still in high school and young adults that's out of high school. So like we're hearing both sides of young adults that's still like that 18, 19, 20, 21 kind of area, and then we still have, like I said, the ones that's still in high school. And so we try to accommodate both, to where we have some young adults that's at work and we have some young adults that's at school. So just trying to like figure out what works for us there. And we have like a lot of young people that has kids, so even we like allow them to bring their kids with them as well to the meetings, just so like that won't be a barrier for them. And yeah.
Thank you. Paradigm shift, you got any smack talk or lessons you think the county and funders or the Turners need to know?
Didn't like the way you looked at us when you said we have an issue with rules, so we'll start there. That was an aggressive look. To your first question, though, I think there's something we can all agree on, and that there's no easy fix to any of this. There's no one solution that's going to solve all of this. But I think there is something that is crucially important that is a necessity, and that's proximity. So I think for me personally, the proximity to like Danique, Kelly, David, system leaders, like we removed the middleman. And so we had direct access, like sometimes almost daily with Danique, towards the end of, hey, this is what we need. And that's phenomenal. What it pointed out was there's a gap between management and boots on the ground. And a quick example is, on the day of our youth retreat, we went to Phillips to pick up our one youth that was at Phillips. And the night before, Danique had sent an email to the entire command staff, said, hey, they're coming to pick him up at 7. We got there at 7. Who are you? Had to call Danique again, had to call David Muhammad on early. And so,
Emailing everybody.
emailing everybody. And so it doesn't matter that the top want to do everything that they can to give us what we feel we need, but if we don't address this gap, we're kind of just treading and circling water. So, a couple quick points for me.
Yeah, I think my main thing is just, like Adam said well, that there's no one solution, right? And we have done a number of things not as well as we wanted to in the program as well. So like this isn't a thing of, of putting blame on anybody else. It's collectively, it's just a lot of learning and a lot of things that I'll go around and have conversations about in lessons. But I feel me and Adam do a lot of challenging, and that can be annoying to people, I feel. And so we're always trying to balance how do we continue to push and nudge and challenge folks in the system's capacity or have the decision, power to adjust things, but be respectful, right? Because like you can do that to a degree and nobody wants to listen to you, right? The saying I always hate the saying a closed mouth doesn't get fed, because a mouth that's always open also loses a lot of opportunities too. So you have to find that balance. And it was just a matter of, finding out how do we understand what the system actors we do have proximity in this program can do. How do we converse about things that maybe are new for them, new for us, and then, how do we keep that lesson so it applies going forward? And so I think those are a lot of the things. It's just always challenge, always be open to being challenged and to challenging. Because if no one's challenging, nothing's changing. And I think that's just always, across the board, you got to be comfortable with that.
Everything that Shannon says could be put on a t-shirt, so feel free to steal any of that. I'm going to shift into a couple questions for specific grantees. So first I have a question for Pathfinders, and you started to talk about some of this, but in this work we often say those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. And one of the things that really stood out to us in your work and in your applications are the ways that you work to shape truly authentic opportunities for young people to lead and co-design and hold each other accountable on your ZYC advisory board in a way that I think models behavior that we hope to see in the broader community among young people and among everyone. So what are some of the elements for successful and truly youth-led work, and how can we make sure that we're honoring young people's perspectives and, like you talked about, compensating them fairly?
So y'all, I'm gonna be very honest.
We love that.
Between me and my vice president, we hold our young people very, very, very accountable, because we seen leadership somewhere, we seen it, and a lot of times, like when ZYC got started, it was like staff like, hey, I recommend this person because I know they could do it. I know they have leadership within them. So we hold them to that standard. We do, like, real bad. So I would just say, like, supporting that, like, supporting them and just making sure that, like I said, we hold them accountable because, like I said, they're leaders. So we want to see that from them at all times as well, because, like we tell them all the time, hey, not just when you're here, like, even when you're outside of here, because that's what a leader is required. A leader is, it's not just like a job where you do it when you're at work and then you go home and you're not at work anymore. No, a leader is like, that's something that's like in you. It's not something that could just be, And we also, like, we hold our staff accountable too, y'all. We love y'all.
It's true.
But we definitely hold them accountable too. So it's like, that works for all of us. And then, like, we like, so if we're coming, well, okay, it's like a chain of command here, because first, young people was gonna come to me and the vice president. And then we'll try to, like, talk amongst ourselves and see if it's like something that we need to fix or tweak. And then we'll take us to staff and we'll be like, hey, okay, so this is what we're coming with and this is what they came to us with. So now we're coming to you guys with that. So like I said, kind of like a chain of command. We're just making sure like their voices is being heard and that we can implement that. And that's what works well with like our governance thing and having a cabinet and things of that nature. Just so it won't just be like, because they have a lot of other stuff going on too. They're like running a whole thing here and still like making time for this youth action board. So it's like, I don't really know how to word it, but we just try to like just make sure everybody is evenly supported. And yeah. I don't know if I was writing that right.
You were. That was beautiful. I would just add that I think that the level of investment on the agency side is really important. We have been able to see with our Youth Action Board, so many the youth leaders are so dedicated and putting and valuing and prioritizing this work and putting so much time, effort, and energy into it. And so we have a responsibility on the agency side as well to be able to support that so that they can lead and they can do what they do. And that is more than just paying them or more than just reserving a room for them. That really requires a substantial investment so that they know they're supported and it's truly valued and that all the practical things can be supported as well. So we joke at Pathfinders that our Youth Action Board is another department of Pathfinders that reports to our Chief Program Officer, which feels very true in practice. And takes that, deserves that level of attention, respect, and energy and time from our leaders, from our staff, from all across the board, which is really beautiful. I think another element that feels really important to this work is just trusting our young people, which sounds really simple and clear, but we shouldn't even be amazed anymore at what they do because whenever we just trust them to lead, they take it in exactly the direction that it needs to go. And so we're constantly trying to figure out how we can support that so it can be youth-led and they can also have support at the same time, which is a balance that we're constantly navigating and looking to them for feedback and direction on. Which is why this is such an exciting funding source and goal because this is a grant that almost all the funds are directly going to or dedicated to going directly to our young people and then allowing them to lead, which is really cool.
Yeah, so they be having meetings and I'll accidentally walk into one and they're like, oh, this is for staff. And I'm like, but I am staff. What are y'all talking about? I am staff. And then also so in the middle of us having our round, we ended up having a coordinator. Mm-hmm. And she has been so awesome and amazing and so great with planning things and putting things together and making these connections happen. So young people can be oh, okay, well, we want, just using an example, okay, we want Executive David Crowley to come in. Okay, she's the person that's all right, let's get the information together, let's plan out writing letters, or she'll come up with that agenda where we'll have a meeting where we're putting together a letter together to send out. Things of that nature. She goes and she gets us the food, and she's very thoughtful when it comes to the food because that's really what drives them as well as food. They love food. But I would say another thing that, because it says how can we make sure that we are honoring young people's perspectives. I would say listening. As adults, people don't want to listen to young people. And that's one of the biggest barriers when it comes to the community and dealing with young people. They don't want to listen to them, or they don't feel oh, you only 16, you ain't really going through that much kind of thing. Like, they kind of just brush off young people kind of situation. So I think just listening and being more open, and just, I don't know, I'm lost for words with that one. I'm
No,
sorry.
I appreciate that, Z. And I think you paint really a fantastic picture of like the way that your structures and systems are built by young people, for young people. Like they are coming up with their own rules and holding each other accountable, which is significantly different than other systems where you walk in and the rules are set and they're not consensual and an adult set them for you and they have no idea what it's like to be in your shoes.
Yeah, definitely. I know with the way that we do things, the whole meeting is basically youth-led. Our group norms, which is basically like our group rules, we just don't like to use the word rules, but our group norms, all of the young people put into creating those youth norms. So like Elmo, be present, mind and body, just like things of that nature. Like, so, and you can have some young people like, hey, mind the body, present, is you present? So like, they also help us with keeping things on track and going on with those meetings as well.
I'll just add the last thing really quickly is a really important element for truly youth-led work that we found is just constant evaluation. So like constantly, it's just an ongoing, never-ending process to constantly be evaluating as a group, individually with young people, amongst ourselves, like where are we at in terms of how youth-led is this feeling and where can we, like, where is there room for improvement? Because it's so continuous.
I love that. And something else that Z pointed out is something that we're proud of about the way that we structured the funding for this as well, which was kind of informed by, so normally the Milwaukee Turners don't give out grants. We usually are begging for them. And so we also know what it's like to have very restricted funding or very copious amounts of reporting. And so if any of you have applied for grants or received grants, you probably know a lot of them have very restricted funding. They'll say you can't use your money on food, or you can't use your money on events, or there may be a maximum percentage that you can spend the money on literally paying the people doing the work. And we try to have as little restriction as possible. It is a 501c3, so we couldn't use it for lobbying, but we really tried to strip away a lot of the restrictions that come with traditional funding in order to let the grantees use their imaginations and also use their budgets to like pay people doing the work. So I will shift to a question for paradigm shift now. In addition to advocacy, your program highlighted the importance of investment in individual young people and truly the amount of time, energy, patience, and positive adult input that is needed for transformational experiences. When I think about every time I've tried to make a major life change, even something as simple as like going to the gym consistently, I know that it's taken me many tries and many times to change my trajectory. So how can we expect young people to magically transform overnight without the resources that they deserve? We also know that the daily rate for incarcerating a young person in a type 1 facility is over $1,200, and that a single fatal shooting incurs costs across the system of over $2 million. That is, we know we're already incurring significant costs across systems in the status quo. So what do you think that your work and your successes with young people show about the kinds of investments we need to be willing to make to empower our young people?
Terrible pun, by the way, when you said you have to shift.
Sorry.
So. And I'm giving her a hard time because this is where I get to prove that Krissie hates me and wants me to fail, because I said to be here, I need a bottle of water, and she gave me a can.
It's a
of
can,
water.
that's close.
That was my request.
And the reason for that is because you're like, what is this dude talking about? This can is 16 ounces of water, whereas a bottle is 15 ounces. And I've done the math on 15 ounces because, as some people have heard me talk before, and we heard David say, it's doubled, so we're nearing $1 million it costs to incarcerate a youth for 1 year, which is insane to me. And so what I'm trying to shift the focus of is away from how much it costs, because we're going to pay that anyways, to if a youth, I'll use myself, when I took somebody's life and I made my victim's mother cry, what is that tear worth? And so I did the math on a 15-ounce bottle of water that I could have used as a visual. Thank you very much. And if you do the math on how much an average person might cry per session, per week, per year, and extrapolate that over a year, it's 7 bottles of water. And so if you can visually look at 7 cans, thank you, Krissie, as opposed to $1 million post-crime, post-victimization, what is 1 tear worth to you? And I think if we can start visualizing that, we need to start reframing the way we look at this and be proactive in trying to prevent those tears from falling, as opposed to pay $1 million to incarcerate plus 7 bottles of water worth of tears. And I did the math in San Diego recently where it was like 266 bottles for just the homicides in San Diego for 1 mother that cries. And so what I think we need to do is disincentivize, and this kind of answers your last question as well, giving individual organizations funds to do what they do. Because I think what we've learned most of all is we can't do this alone. And there are so many phenomenal organizations in this city that work with youth. And this is the reason why we didn't apply for this latest round, is because we feel we would do the overall ecosystem a disservice. But we feel we bring a lot of good ideas to the table. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, because if we win a grant, we're taking money away from people who are doing this full time, and we need to invest in them and incentivize them by the funding working together. Say, we're not going to fund you unless you're working with these other organizations that do something that you don't necessarily do well. So funders, you can control more than you think. Quit giving money to these organizations just to say, here, do what you do. Disincentivize that and say, we're forcing you to work with other organizations. I think that can help youth in a more effective way.
Yeah, and I think we didn't get a chance to talk about this, but one of the beautiful things that blossomed from round 1 of funding is that there was a collaborative formed called The Beginning. The Milwaukee Turners are a part of it. So are Shannon and Adam, and I think about 7 or so other community partners that are organizations, not just working on youth justice, but working with young people, working for the community, providing different types of resources to create a more holistic ecosystem. And that's something that you all really paved the way for, showing us that working together really is an incredible way forward. Shannon, do you have any non-can related responses?
Is that also a pun? Come on, Krissie.
I'm actually very happy you didn't, because it made him uncomfortable, so thank you for that. So there's a couple things that kind of stood out for me as investments. One is in our first round, we had a youth who, from the very beginning, it seemed this individual was just going to be incredibly difficult to get through to. It just was the case. His needs, his family experience, he was combative at every stage that we could. And I think we had a conversation, me, Adam, Roy, and Todd, who were the formerly incarcerated mentors on the trip, collectively 100 years I think we'd almost done in prison. And we said, I think this is going to be a planting seeds case with this youth. We don't know if we're going to be able to get through to him in time, right? But we can focus the shift to be planting seeds. So it's kind of not thinking of it as like this is a lost cause, because all of us were those lost causes at one point, right? That was the key reason why we wanted to design this, is that you have a myriad of youth who are in prison right now who are exactly who me and so many that are doing this work now and doing well post-release were at one point. We were the lost causes. We were the lock them up and throw away the keys. We were the hellraisers that you won't give a second chance to. But that's not the case anymore. And so something in our past planted a seed in some way that grew to allow us to have a different trajectory. At some point, it started to blossom. And the most we could do in that situation, we felt, is let's just keep focusing on staying in his ear, staying present, and maybe later that will happen. And I think the investment there is that you don't always see the fruits of your labor in the moment, right? And when you're dealing with youth who have, and this is the other investment, I would love to see some kind of a simulation. Maybe this is another thing that is done. But if you go into the homes and the environments that a lot of youth are dealing with day to day, I'm shocked that there's not more violence, to be honest. it's insanity. I mean, I don't know how you're supposed to focus, grow, feel trust, be healthy, any of it in some of the environments that some of the youth, that we were navigating the program with, let alone all of the programs that are doing this work. I mean, Pathfinders is dealing with this situation, their entire existence. We just got into this. And so it was like right away, this is one, you have to be able to shift and not look at it from anyone's perspective as we're going to make this algorithmic change next year, right? We're going to invest right now and then look back at it again next year and say, what changed? Nothing? Oh, failure. Like that's so myopic and silly. That's not how, this is like nanotechnology, right? You can't use the same theories that work in regular science and nanotechnology. It just doesn't work. And you have to be able to say, okay, at the end of the day, we know what people need. Everyone knows what humans need. We know what we need. You know what a family needs. Nobody asks as parents and says, what's the value of having our kid have healthy food and going to school and being in a protective environment? That's what they need, right? You don't have to see studies on that. That's obvious. And so when you do that, you're going to increase your odds of everything working out better. And so at the end of the day, I think this investment that I kind of saw from it was there are so many things that come from just investing in youth, and you don't always see it right away, and you don't have to, and that shouldn't be your barometer, right? You do it because that's the way human beings grow and develop, and everything is better in that sense. So when you keep that foundation, it'll help you continue to go through these difficult times, and when you think something's not working, and just keep pouring in and keep pouring in, and I promise you it's going to start to blossom eventually.
And I think that really highlights the way that we need, that now I can say we as funders, even though we're barely a funder, but that really highlights the way that we as funders need to consider what we're looking at when we look at measures of success. Like there are a lot of metrics that count like recidivism as the only measure of success. That's very short-sighted because, like Shannon was saying, the young person's environment may not have changed. And so if we see the same behavior, that's pretty predictable. Actually, we all should have expected that. And so being more imaginative with the way that we receive the stories of grantees or people doing the work and the things that we choose to highlight and the things that we see as successes in the interim, I think is incredibly important. So now I'm gonna ask some more questions for all of you. And if there are any questions that are on the index cards, if I can have one of the staff just bring it to me on the side throughout this, that's fine. But in Milwaukee, we have seen the way that young people, especially Black youth, are talked about in the media, in Facebook comments, and even by some of our elected officials. In the current federal landscape, the funding and appetite for basic supports for young people are in jeopardy, whether for prevention, like funding for housing, for intervention, like community violence interruption, or for alternatives to incarceration. As supports for the group of young people who maybe need a little less intervention take effect, we also may see more focus on some of these quote unquote bad and scary stories about quote unquote high risk youth in the media and in community conversation. When in fact, to me, that's a sign that we're focusing on the right young people and that they're just not getting enough dosage and enough inputs, but we're exactly where we need to be. So how does your work push back against these negative myths about young people, and how can the community help shift conversation away from blaming young people and their parents and towards the generational systemic changes we need to see?
So like for this situation, we have a member who was in and out of, been incarcerated since he was 8, like in and out, in and out. He never was able to be out for a full year. And now he's been out for 2. Or yeah, he's like 2 months away from being out for 2 years now. But that was more so, okay, so his situation was always like, they had stereotyped him, or they knew him for being a bad kid or having issues at home, so he could be walking and it'd be like, hey, and that was in Kenosha, so it was like way worse out there than Milwaukee, but it'd be like, hey, what you doing out here? And they'll just like kind of start picking and nitpicking with them. So like I'm saying that to say, like, it's very much possible. And I know what we're doing is, like, we're trying to have these workshops with the main, like, these people. Like, we're the head sheriff, like, deputy, the top deputy. We want to see her. Like, we want to bring her in. We want to talk to her. We want to tell her, like, from our experiences, what we experienced in there and what can be changed or what needs to be changed. And I feel like because it's supposed to be a correctional thing, and it's not really seeming like it's so correctional because people are steady going back. So what is it that you guys are doing in there that's not being done the correct way? You know, so kind of like just examining that and like bringing that to light. And then also like with these case managers, like a lot of times like they could get placed in group homes, young people could get placed in group homes or something, and the ball kind of just fall after that. The case manager stop checking up in or things of that nature, like holding them accountable for those situations kind of thing. And just being able to put light to them and being able to hear it from young people themselves and like showing like this has been a problem for years and it's still a problem and it's even more of a problem now. You know, so like just pointing that out to them and like I said, hopefully, fingers crossed, they're listening and they'll hear us instead of let me stop using the word listening because I feel like if you listen, you're not just like you're not hearing it, you're letting it go in one ear out the other. So we want them to hear us and hear the changes that need to be made.
One of the ways that we push back against these myths is by celebrating our young people. So recognizing the really like incredible and awesome things that they're already doing, whether that's in their community, to be able to take care of themselves and their families, and just really being able to just celebrate them because they deserve that. And giving them opportunities for leadership to have a voice, safe alternatives and options that are options that can prevent them from having to be engaged in the justice system or impacted by it in any kind of way. And like Z said, like giving them a voice and giving them an opportunity and amplifying that wherever we possibly can, because they're I forget exactly what that quote was, but like they're the ones who know what's needed. And so like Z said, not just listening to them, but like asking for that feedback and giving them those opportunities to be at the table in the same way that we are, and then actively like incorporating that and doing what we need to put that into practice.
And also like putting the word out about these programs and resources and centers. A lot of people like, every time I run into somebody, I'm like, hey, y'all ever heard of Pathfinders? Like I could be in a Lyft or Uber, just walking at the restaurant, waitress, I don't care who, like I'm just always like, hey, you ever heard of Pathfinders? Or even like any law enforcement or medical professionals that I run into, I always ask them. Or I'd be like, hey, do you guys know about like the advocacy program at Pathfinders? Like, so sometimes it's just lack of knowledge of people not knowing that these things are out here for the grabs, like for the help, like, you know? And then like just building more connections as well. We are really big on like building connections with other organizations or because they might have young people that need our services or that need to like these workshops that we do in ZYC or something, or building connections with schools. Basically like where these group of young people that they say is so bad. Like we try to draw them in the most and we try to let them know like, hey, because a lot of times people haven't been there to support them. So we want to show them that we're there to support them. And it looks different when it's coming from a peer versus an adult, you know? So just being there for them in that way as well.
And last thing is that making sure that everybody knows that every young person deserves unconditional support, like truly unconditional support and unconditional positive regard. So as much as we can just like make sure that every young person feels that, and then anyone, any provider or any partners that we come in contact with like can understand that as well.
They're really big on that. Like I've been in situations and they're like, okay, now we can do it this way or we can do it this way. You have to the end of the day to figure out which way you want to do it, but I support you either way. So even if it was something that I wasn't ready for. And honestly, like looking back at it, like not gonna say that I regret not going with the choice that I knew I should have made at that moment. Not gonna say that I regret it because I wouldn't have the knowledge or been through the things that I've been through to know what I know now. But just knowing and having that support from them was like really huge for me. And that's what kept me going, like kept me coming back to them. And then like I grew up not knowing who I was able to trust, and then building that connection with them ended up helping me like open up to them, trust them more. So like then when it came to another situation where it was like, okay, we can do this and we get you started here, or you could just go and finish doing it how you want to do it. Now I'm starting to pick how they're doing it. I want to go with the way that you're doing it because now I trust you and I know that you're here to support me and that you're for me.
I appreciate you sharing that powerful journey, and I think like that's a testament to the work. Paradigm shift. Do you want to answer this question or an audience question? It's up to you.
I could add something to this one. So in another part of my life, I do a lot of work around what we call correcting the narrative. And as Adam mentioned about proximity, the thing that everyone carries that they can do, if you don't have money to donate, if you don't have time to volunteer, you can at least be someone who helps engage a conversation with somebody who doesn't know these things, right? That's the very bare minimum we can do. Don't kick people, don't spit on them, don't shame them, like engage in a conversation. Because I think our instinct is to very much, and some folks, there's no win, there's a purpose while they're trying to say something, you can't get through to some people, I say save your energy. But basically, always think about how can you engage in a conversation to challenge folks to see this topic, this idea, this myth differently. And there are so many opportunities, I think, where we know someone that might be an access point to a large group. We know someone that might be able to make a decision around housing or around employment or around working in the system, whatever it may be. And we don't really have the conversations, let them know what we know, what we think about it, but then we'll go off and we'll say something like, yeah, so-and-so started talking crazy, I don't want to talk to them. But it's like, who's having that conversation with this person then? Who's addressing that narrative? Who's addressing that myth? And the thing that everyone can do is always just have these conversations, always push and challenge to have people think, did you know about this? Have you heard about this organization? Have you heard about this project? Have you ever been someone in this situation? And just kind of open that door in their mind to think about things differently. So for me, the myth is, it starts with that. But I've been asked before, if I had all the money in the world, what would I do? And I would take over the media, because media is more powerful than anything in the world, I believe. I think media guides politics. I believe it guides religion. I believe it guides everything. Where people go comes from what they've heard their entire life. Anecdotes, on TV, influencers, right? It shapes all of that in a way that is so powerful. And if the media is only portraying the negative, what do you think people are going to think? Right? There should be some kind of balance requirement, I think, in the media. You're going to show something bad, you got to show something good for the same thing, because that's not the full story. And you're giving people a sense of things that live in areas that don't even have any connection to this issue, that are now voting and spending and having their opinion about things that affect people that are actually living in the area. And that's how that comes from, is, media.
Anything to add, Adam?
I can answer this in a weird way. I've spoken with a lot of different groups, and the hardest presentation by far that I ever gave was to firefighters, which sounds odd. And one firefighter said, you know what it's like to stick your finger in the head of an 11-year-old girl because she was shot in the head to keep her alive. So when you think about the myths, who are the people that see the worst of a juvenile's choices? First responders, right? And so one of the things that we do is, and this is dual, we created something called a Bullets Echo, where we wanted to show the youth what they were running away from when they pulled the trigger. So we took them to Chicago Fire Department's training facility. They had this mock shooting where an ambulance came in, brought a dummy that blinks, breathes, and our youth had to intubate them, let the air out of their chest. And the firefighters, the way I can still see this image, wrapped their arms around the youth to try to guide them through opening the trachea. And it was one of the first times you could see a firefighter who sees the worst of humanity every single day. I can help this person, not be what I see every day. and take them into the ER. Same thing, you see surgeons every single day, gunshot victims. Like this is building up in their minds. So when we bring youth, and when I said dual, showing them like I am one of those youth that victimized them, for those who came to my crime scene. For them to see, I hope, the successes of who I am today, that shows them like, hey, even a youth who makes the most terrible of decisions 30 years ago can hopefully turn into a good human being. And that hope, I think that's how you change that myth that you don't always have to be what you were yesterday.
I love that. And I will say, I'll be transparent, when Adam and Shannon were first describing the different components of their program, I was worried that, we've all heard about like scared straight, and I was worried and skeptical that, that this would fall on kind of a negative and shame-based side of things in the way that you two have made the experiential and the reality of people's choices ring true for young people, I think is absolutely incredible. So let's see how much time we have left. All right, I have a lot of fantastic questions, and we won't have time to get to all of them, but I will try. And then you can always contact these wonderful people after the fact as well. There's a question for Paradigm Shift. You mentioned 7 additional months of mentoring and support for the young people after the retreat, and I think you didn't totally get a chance to get through this part of the presentation, but how have you structured and maintained that? And like, were you able to obtain additional moments, to use your term, of separation or of realization for the young people?
Yeah, we are in month 3, and the way it's kind of navigated is we have a mentor manager. I shout out to Charlene Moore, was our mentor manager last year. And this year, one of our mothers from the previous year is the mentor manager. So she was also a mentor. She's also a mother whose son was lost to gun violence. So she knows the issue very intimately, right? And the whole program struck a chord with her in such a way that she just wanted to really be involved going forward. And she manages, making sure she put our training together for all the mentors before the whole program started. And so she just keeps track of everybody. We have different group chats that everybody's in for every youth. We stay engaged with kind of checking in. Literally tonight, one of our mentors who works at 4 and 4 Life is taking one of the youth to a job interview. So it's just a collaborative effort to always kind of stay active and stay in touch about what's happening, who's got eyes on, who's seen, who's talked to last, But then that also brings in the families. And so one of the youth we have right now, his mother is really kind of struggling with some things. And she needed some stuff for back to school for the youth and some of his brothers and sisters. We were able to provide some of that, and it was just like a relief for her in the scenario that she's got all these things going on. It was one less thing she had to worry about, so that we could help, and that helps, the youth. It's just it's a holistic thing. You can't just focus on like helping necessarily, the youth themselves. And that's why we tried to have this, where understanding it just cannot be a scenario in the second time we did this where it's just a focus on the youth. Like there has to be a stability factor on the other side of that, because we're only one side. And if they run away from like what we have going on, and then the other side of their life has no stable factors and nobody really cares, it's not going to really work. And so there had to be an element of stability with some loved one or support factor in their life. And so we just are working with the mothers as well. And yeah, ultimately it's just a lot of collaboration in that way, and being flexible and making sure that people have what they need from the mentor side if they need a break, and from the youth side that, we're listening and we're there and we're just available for whatever their needs are and the family. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. I hope it does, whoever you are, anonymous question asker. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm going to try to mash up 2 questions together. So then this is going to be for everybody.
Okay, DJ.
This is your final question, so feel free to also take the opportunity to say any last words. But I'll frame it with this. As you move forward, what do you envision for the future of youth justice in Milwaukee? As we work to build the Youth Justice Community Table, which hopefully all of you will be a part of, what do you hope to see in the short term for our coalition of organizations working towards concrete wins for transformative systems change? And based on what you've learned doing this work, what are any specific policies that you believe are most likely to get kids out of the system and reduce the size of the system? So all that plus any parting words. I never said it would be easy.
I can speak to the first one. In this space, there are so many times where someone will say, I didn't even know about this service. I didn't know about this organization. And then you have other organizations that say, I didn't know about that organization. I didn't know about this service. Then you have people that work in organizations saying, I didn't know we did that. So the level of disconnect between what's actually available and what's happening and what people know is pretty significant. And it's not just a thing where people just don't know stuff and it's like, that's what happens. These are missed opportunities. Like we're not seeing what happens when you don't know about a service. A good example is about a week ago, I was talking to a woman who used to work at an organization called Safe and Stable Families. And I've known about her previous existence at this place, and she's talked to me about it before, but something didn't really click for what it was, and I didn't hold on to the information about the service for a while. And we're sitting there, and she's telling me more about it, and we have one of our youth that needs to be housed. He's facing potential going into the foster care system, and his mother's, just really terrified. And I've been trying to percolate on, like, how can we think of something that can address this without knowing a lot about the housing situation for youth. And so she's telling me about this whole process where they have this alternative foster care system that is not the system, it's completely voluntary, and it's now certified so that people can be placed in this through the system. And I'm like, this is a perfect thing for what we need right now. Now, had I known of this or had my brain held on to it better in the past when I knew about it, I could have offered this quicker and maybe, fortunately it still got caught in time, maybe. But how many situations are like that where we learn of this thing too late or we never know of this thing that could have been the life-saving service or opportunity for a youth, an adult, a family, whatever it may be. I think we completely under respect, I guess, to make up a word, so I'm using that from now on, the amount of power in just knowing what is around you. It's kind of like having an iPhone and only using it for phone calls, right? You'd look at somebody crazy that would do that, but we do that equivalent when it comes to the services in the community. So I think it has to be something that is spoken about with the ZYC, table that we have. People have to take and make a commitment to know what is in their ecosystem or what is available. It can't just be if I run across that, do we have a resource list? This has to be as important as training, as HR, as insurance, as mental health. Like, you have to make it so people really take time to know or make sure your team understands what is available around you, because you're not going to do it alone, even if you do everything perfect from your mission statement.
Who wants to go next? Or I'll start calling on people.
Adam.
So what I envision at some point, whether it's 5 years, even though we don't want it, like realistically, we don't want it to be that long, but realistically, it might take that long, because we're going against like the government, all types of stuff to try to, go against the juvenile justice, So like, but I don't know, like if we could bring back places like, residentials instead of like the DT, or something like that, or like where it's like a boot camp or something versus DT and like serving time, or, like something that's different where they can learn from versus just sitting there and like feeling like it's more punishment than anything. But the goal overall is to like have zero youth in the justice system. Like that's what we're trying to correct, and that's what we're trying to, get a hold to. Like, and all of us working together, I feel like we could definitely make that happen. It's gonna be tough, even though I know everything isn't easy, and sometimes it is like, barriers that might try to come about or something, but it's how we fight through it and how we get through it and how we help like the young people get through it, And I love how you guys were talking about like supporting the whole family as a whole. I love that. And also, I had to come back to you because you said that you guys were barely a funder, but you guys have done so much since funding this grant. So I don't want to hear you say you barely a funder again, okay?
Appreciate that.
But yeah, and then Also, how I said in the other question, like, those closest to the problem is the closest to the solution. That definitely sounded like something Deshauna would say. And that's like what she lives by when she is like coordinating things and like trying to figure out things, or how can things be better in the community, or how can we make this look different, or something of the sort. So that's definitely a ringer for me.
I'm with Z. Of course, the goal we would envision would be to have no young people involved in the justice system. I would love to see like really meaningful alternatives for young people where they have options and support so they don't have to get to that point. And most importantly, having all of their needs met, having all of their survival, their basic needs met, having safe housing, access to support that will be there for them, and help them figure out whatever it is they want to figure out, and support them in whatever it is that their goals are. I'm really excited about the opportunity to be able to have the community table and different partners who are all a part of this work be engaged and collectively working towards a solution. And my hope is that, which we are very excited to support, is that youth voice and the voice of those with lived expertise is really meaningfully incorporated into that collective work.
Last word.
I'll keep it short because I'm looking at the clock and I don't want to get yelled at. I feel that we as adults, we have an obligation to incentivize hope to young people. Because if youth don't feel that they have a future, us thinking that they're going to invest in tomorrow is stupid. So you can have the best program in the world, but if a youth doesn't feel like they have a future, it doesn't matter. So we have to find some way, and I don't claim to know the answer to that. I will again challenge funders, and it echoes what Shannon said. Not only do you have to find out what else is out there, because we duplicate effort so often in this city, and I'm sure it's not dissimilar in other cities, but I think funders and even people in positions of power have the ability to say, we are not going to assist you unless you work together. And I think if people start to really lean into that, quality over quantity, the metrics of how many youth did you serve? I hate that question, despise it. I automatically turn my attention away from you if you even say that thing. And so quit talking about how many and talk about one youth and what hope would you give to that one youth. And so I think we need to find some way to incentivize it.
Can I add one super quick thing? Before we reach our goal of having no young people involved in the justice system, I think that another vision that we have is to make sure that those justice systems that are impacting and engaging with young people are like asking for, listening to, incorporating the feedback and the voices of young people and what's working, what's not working, what's helpful to them. And we see that happening in some really meaningful ways, and we're excited to be able to continue that process.
Thank you. Well, I think it's clear from all of the incredible wisdom at this table that you have a really great understanding and vision of what Zero Youth Corrections might be like, and we've had a lot of time to think about this. But I will say, for folks outside of this room or for folks who are less proximate to the work, it can sound really scary to hear the phrase Zero Youth Corrections, because it's difficult to imagine all of the supports and the rich ecosystem of investment that would be necessary to make that world possible. And so I think it's important when we think about Zero Youth Corrections to not think about that as an absence of support, but an incredible presence and investment of just a different environment that helps young people make healthy decisions and flourish. So I hope as we leave this room that we think about imagination and having a higher tolerance for these little experiments like the ones sitting at this table, like making food for your neighbor, like helping the kid down the street instead of calling the cops on them. I also think that we should think about investment, and we should start to get used to the amount of investment that will be necessary to build this different world, because it feels shocking right now, but I think that we've heard today that this is already the amount of money that we're spending on the status quo. This is already the amount of money that we're spending on police and prisons and detention and the court system, and clearly it's not working. And I think we should also think about what are the narratives around young people, around their families, around Black young people in Milwaukee, and how can we reframe those narratives to be more productive and to honor the dignity and humanity of everyone in our community. So with that, I want to thank all of you for coming and sitting here. I want to thank our incredible grantees and panelists, and all of the Pathfinders, ZYC Action Board. Today's nonpartisan virtual forum was sponsored in part by the Wisconsin Civic Power Table, MICA, the Public Welfare Foundation, and the Hertzfeld Foundation. I would like to thank our guests on the live stream, our super awesome production team, especially Cheston, VanHuss, Michaela, Jalise, and Loki, our co-producers, Jahan and Becky, Dr. Emily Stirk for doing everything else, our staff and volunteers, our wonderful interpreters at DJC Interpreting, and of course the great folks who have supported this forum. Thank you to Taqueria El Cabrito for the wonderful tacos. If you're interested in supporting the Milwaukee Turners and our work, or becoming a sponsor of the Vel Phillips Forum, please visit us on Facebook or visit our website, milwaukeeturners.org. We also, I want to highlight, have 2 upcoming Vel Phillips Forums that we're very excited about, so please save the date for August 20th for our next forum, which is on healthcare. And I think that this forum is particularly germane to probably the folks in this room. On October 8th, we're going to be joined by Alec Katsanis, who will discuss his new book, Propaganda: How Police and Media Manipulate Our News. And I think that there are a lot of common themes that we talked about today that are highlighted in the book with that incredible author. Until next time, please take care of one another. Thank you.